Second, and I am calling our special board meeting to order. This is a work session. And we have our friend from the Council of Great Cities Schools to help us work through strategic planning. Mr. Treasurer, will you please call the roll?
President Adair?
Present.
Ms. Beckerly?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Cole? Dr. Pierce?
Present.
Mr. Ragland?
Here.
Vice President Reyes?
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you so much. On our agenda tonight is a discussion facilitated by AJ Crable, and we are going to continue talking about our 5-year strategic plan goals and goal setting process. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
A motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole? Oh, he's not here. My bad. Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, we will welcome AJ Crable from Council Great City Schools. Hi, AJ. It's always great to see you.
Good evening, likewise.
And we will turn it to you.
Excited for the work that you all have done and to try to take the next steps in the direction of being intensely focused on improving student outcomes. The work that's been done so far has involved you all taking time to go out and listen to feedback and aspirations from your community and really bringing a lot of that together and trying to synthesize those learnings. At the same time, you've also listened from your superintendent to reports that she's provided about the current reality for your students. And so it's this confluence of the vision of your community and the current reality of your students reported through the data that you've been provided that you are responsible for synthesizing into a set of goals that describe the near-term vision and that are aligned with the long-term vision that we've been moving toward. Simultaneously, you took the community's feedback and listened for the values of the community and tried to define that into a set of guardrails that describe the non-negotiables that the administration must adhere to on the pathway to accomplishing the goals. And so what we have to look at this evening is a presentation put together by your team that describes first a one-pager that highlights the long-term vision that's been crafted, the near-term vision that's been crafted, and then begins to give you some insights into what are the action steps, the strategic steps that the administration will take to begin operationalizing the near-term and long-term vision. So I want to start by putting that slide on the screen. Is that possible for someone to do, or do I need to share my own screen?
Misty can. It's the first slide, Misty. Slide number 2, yeah.
And so first, I just invite you to, let's start at the top and work our way down. And then after we've digested this a little bit, then we can dive into some of the more specific elements of each of this. I believe on your local machine, you should be able to zoom in and zoom out on this. I kind of like the main screen being exactly the way it is. So Misty, I wouldn't ask you to change anything, just so that other people who want to look lower down on the page, they can. But on your local machine, if you want to zoom in, you should be able to do so. And I want to start with the first part, Portrait of a Graduate, our long-term vision for all students. So this is really intended exactly as the document describes, to say back to the community, where are we going? And over a 5 to 20 year timeline, where is the arc of our collective aspirations bending toward in terms of what it is that our students know and are able to do? And what is described here is just really these 6 pillars that where we're headed long term is that our students will demonstrate adaptability, communication, creativity, critical thinking, global empathy, and a fluency with technology. That if those things are present, that really describes the long-term vision of what we believe all our students will need to know and be able to do in order to be successful in the world that they'll be presented with 5 to 20 years from now. What questions, tonight is really an open dialogue to talk about the work that's been done thus far and to what extent it does or doesn't align. And so I just want to open the floor. What questions, comments, reflections do you have regarding this longer term vision, this portrait of a graduate? What questions or comments do you have? This has been discussed a number of times. And so if there isn't a whole lot new, that's perfectly fine. I just didn't want to step over that part of the conversation, that's all.
Sure. AJ, are the guardrails in order of priority?
We'll come to those. We're not there yet. We're starting with the portrait of a graduate. The answer to your question is no, but there isn't a rank order of those, of the goals or the guardrails, but we'll come to that in a moment. Any other questions or comments about portrait of a graduate before we move on? All right. Then after you've developed a long-term vision.
Hold on. I sorry, my thing was off. I do have a question.
Yeah.
My mute was muted. Is there a team or a process? I mean, measuring these things, I know, will be different than how we normally measure student progress. These are.
Yeah, so when you think of a long-term vision like this, the near-term intention isn't to measure those directly. The near-term intention is to measure the goals and guardrails. And as a board, you shouldn't be signing off on goals and guardrails if you don't have some amount of confidence that accomplishment of those in the near term puts you on a trajectory to accomplish the vision in the long term.
Yeah, no, well, so that kind of gets to my question, and it's not one that needs to be answered. It's kind of more, I just want to make sure we're attending to this process. Like,
yeah.
It seems to me to some extent, we need to know how ultimately we're going to measure these things, even though we're not on our way there yet, so that we have a sense of how closely aligned the goals and guardrails are. And so that's kind of my question.
Generally speaking,
how do we know?
So generally speaking, you wouldn't measure the long-term vision directly. You'd always be measuring the piece of it that is 5 years directly in front of you. However, in your unique circumstance, it's also the case that you'll actually be literally measuring these things because you've built them into one of the goal recommendations, specifically the development of portrait-ready graduates.
Okay.
So in your unique situation, you actually do have something that is one-to-one aligned with the long-term vision. But in a classical strategic planning framework, that's not necessarily the case. The long-term vision.
Assuming in that case, we know we're not defining the end goal too.
The definition, so the vision statement is intended to be really that, visionary, aspirational. And so generally it has no more measurement associated with it than what you see described here on this document, where each of those 6 pillars does have, a sentence that describes what it is that students should know or be able to do in each of those 6 pillars. And that's normally about as far as you go with something as amorphous as a 20-year vision statement. Okay. The intention is never to is never that you're directly trying to measure something 20 years away. Rather, that's what the goals and guardrails serve as, is they are the near-term measurement. And part of the judgment call you're making is, if we accomplish these, is it our judgment that that is moving us in the trajectory of this longer, further, more amorphous vision?
Okay. Thanks.
That's also why the goals and guardrails do actually have to have very smart metrics associated with them, because they are the measurement part of your long-term vision.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, other questions or comments about the Portrait of a Graduate? All right. Again, something that's I think unique for you all in your portrait is that you all actually are making some endeavor to apply some measurement to it through your goals and guardrails. And so with that, transition to looking at the goals and guardrails, where the portrait is your 5 to 20 year vision, the goals and guardrails is your 3 to 5 year vision. But as it implies, there are two different elements of it. There are the goals that describe what are the things that we want students to be able to do over the next 3 to 5 years that will position them to move in the trajectory of our long-term vision. And what are the values that we have to honor over the next 3 to 5 years as we pursue our long-term vision. We'll start with goals. And so there are 3 overarching goal categories around strengthening reading proficiency, around developing portrait-ready graduates, around closing the gaps. And I want to invite the administration to step in this conversation to walk us through some of the specific metrics around it. Like, what are the ways that we're seeing that these can actually can in fact be measured over time? And so I want to start with strengthen reading proficiency. I think it takes us to the next slide.
Yeah. I'm sorry, if you go back one slide, please. Right. And then just go back one more slide to that. I just want to make a comment that some of the language, the verb, we had a meeting about changing some of the language, the verbiage on some of these goals. So just know that the final draft will have that updated language. So for example, we talked about, we moved improve reading to strengthening reading, et cetera. So just know that some of that language, those verbiage will be changed and updated. All right, the next slide, please. So remember, we talked about this MTSS administrative guideline, administrative guide, and we talked about the importance and how that we were going to utilize this book. It's a collective work of voices of our teachers, administrators, staff, and community members who provided ideas and insights and feedback through the development process of this, this guide. This is the core instructional framework, is the foundation of our multi-tiered system of support. So everything that we're doing is going to be based on this MTSS guidelines. So I just wanted to remind us that we have the guidebook to our processes, and we've updated that. So I wanted to start with that. So our next slide. So we talk about strengthening our reading proficiency. So in that guideline, in this document, on page, go to the next slide, please, Misty, just a second. Our team had outlined, and it's on, when you get a chance, it's on page 55 in this guideline. The academic services team reviewed all the state data, achievement data for the past 3 years by grade and content. In consideration of the rate of change and the predicted scores for the 2024-25 school year. So they've already done the work and put it in this booklet for us of where we believe that we can be with our Ohio State reading tests by 2025. So that was already outlined for us. And you would see we started with our KRA, 3rd grade, 4th, 5th, all the way to 8th grade. And so if you go back to the former slide, and we talked about the goals then will be the percentage of students who are proficient on the state ELA assessment in grades K through 8 would demonstrate an average of increase of 30 percentage points between spring 2019 and spring 2026. Now I moved that to 26 because we will be starting actually this fall. So I just added that additional year. And then a percentage of students who are proficient on the state ELA assessment in 3rd grade would demonstrate an average increase of 27 percentage points between spring 19 and spring 26. And if you go back to that slide, and I'm sorry to have you keep go back further. I'm sorry, Misty, go up. No.
We want the chart.
Yeah, back to the chart, my apologies. Yeah, you will see that is, she has those, the team has already have those goals of where we should be by that. We're just going to add a year by 2026. So it was already done for us when we chose this particular goal. It's already framed. The organization, all the teachers, everyone already knows that these are our goals because they were outlined in this framework. We have our new curriculum in ELA and mathematics. So this information is known, and we've already begun the work towards improving on this work. Now, we didn't anticipate COVID, of course, but we are making strides to meet these goals. So let's go to the next one, please. So again, so we pulled out the 3rd grade. This is just pulling from the former slide, just pulling that up from the spring Ohio State test to where we believe we would be by spring 2026. It's just pulling from that previous slide, those 2 areas up front.
What questions, comments do you have?
Okay, good. Yeah, I was trying to decide if we were waiting till the end. And this is an observation, and it's just, you know, the growth is, you know, very aggressive. On the other hand, on the one hand, and I appreciate that you're definitely saying we're going to make huge strides. But if we only end up with 65% of our 8th graders reading, and 65 at the grade level or passing, and 65% of our 6th graders, I guess, I mean, you know, we have to deal with the reality of where we are, I guess. It's just the other question I have, that's my observation. And, you know, it's reality. What might happen, or what is the process to necessarily adjust these things? Because I'm going to get on my soapbox for hopefully just 30 seconds, but we might see after 3 years of, you know, this new reading program foundations, but it might go up quicker.
Correct.
And do we adjust the end thing, or do we keep the end thing and just exceed our goals?
I generally recommend that you change them once you've exceeded your 5-year ambition.
Okay. So this is for 5 years.
Yeah, so I'm working, you know, with another board. They adopted a goal around CTE that was dramatically more ambitious than their 5-year trend line had suggested. So over the past 5 years, they've been doing kind of this slow growth, and they adopted a 5-year set of goals that looked much more like this. 2 years in, they accomplished their 5-year goal. What it speaks to is how quickly you can ramp up possibility for students when everybody is focused and rowing in the same direction, and when resources are consistently flowing in that direction. But it meant at the end of 2 years, they had the same question you have. Now, what do we do? And so
Okay.
what I said, the first thing that you need to do before you do anything else, you need to celebrate those students and teachers
Yes.
before you do anything else.
Every
Like, y'all need
single
to
one of them.
break out some balloons, break out some cake. People love cake, you know, but you need to celebrate those teachers, celebrate those students for the remarkable work. And then after you've done that, then you need to go back and decide, are we going to retire this particular goal, or are we going to re-up it, but then push our target out even further? And in their case, they chose to re-up it and push it out even further. But that is the decision you make at that time. But I would do that once you hit your 5-year target, whether you accomplish that at the end of year 2 or the end of year 4, or at the end of year 5. That's when I would reassess and change it.
All right, thanks.
Right. And I like to piggyback on what AJ stated. He's absolutely right. This framework moves everyone to rowing in the same direction. Every school, every region, we get rid of some of those, you know, those other programs that other schools have been doing. That's why the board supported, you know, the adoption of a reading program. So everyone must be doing the same thing. And we have the basis of what that looks like in this guideline. So if the board approves this goal, then our team is going to come back with these goals spelled out even more, and we would do a presentation of what that would look like in the classroom, et cetera. You know, I'm just doing that high level overview to say, we believe that we can accomplish this, and then that how we're going to get to that, we will bring that back once the board says, yes, this is what we want to focus on. But again, we believe we can do it because we've already put it in print in this document for you. So when we're thinking about that, this is something we can definitely, we're already setting up our organization, our framework, so that we are able to achieve these goals.
I will piggyback on that a little bit, Carol. I think of all of your goals. I think these are the hardest. Like, and that's even considering you have other goals that call for metrics that you haven't even started measuring yet. And I still assure you these will likely be harder to accomplish in those. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's really challenging work. I mean, you just have to sit down, with students one by one, and just do the work and provide the support. And there's not any good way to cheat it. It helps if everybody, is singing from the same hymnal. It certainly helps if you find ways to strategically target your students who are furthest behind with additional supports, particularly from your educators who are most effective. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do to help, but at the end of the day, literacy is a grind, and it just takes a dogged determinism among your really devoted staff to make that happen day in, day out. It is in this area where, as a board, your ability to say no to other things that come along will be most important.
Yes. And also making sure we bring back those formative assessment too. So we have the short cycle assessments. So we know we use iReady to kind of benchmark where our students are. So we're just making sure that we're bringing that information back to the board, letting you know how our students are doing on the end of the year, middle of the year, so the BOE, MOE, and OI, we're giving you that information. So we're doing temperature checks of how well our students, we're predicting our students to do on these tests in the end. But again, we will be bringing that information back to the board. So it's not that, oh, wow, we started in the fall and we found out at the end of the year that we didn't meet any of these goals. We are coming back and letting the board know how our students are progressing throughout the school year.
That's really important, I think, because that's going to keep us, keep it in front of us, regular reporting. And then we'll be asking questions like, it'll be more apparent to us as we're deciding other things. Is this going to impact that, either favorably or not? So that's really great. And I think I just spoke out of turn because we're supposed to be taking turns. Sorry.
Let me just ask this document that this page is part of. Uh, what is this, and it's still a draft, but eventually, what is it going to be used for? If it's going to be used by the public in any way, then all of the acronyms need to be spelled out or just footnoted. But, if somebody looks at this page and OST and ELA, they're not going to have a clue what this is talking about. So we just need ways to do that throughout the document.
Yeah, the document that will most be used to communicate the work that you have done back to the community. So for you to be able to say, we've listened to you all, and as a result of our listening, here is the direction we're going, is actually that first page. And you'll want to scrutinize that first page because you're correct, it does need to largely be divorced of kind of any edu speak. And I think it is, but it's always worth going back and getting another set of eyes on it. But that is a document that you'll predominantly use to go back out and say, we listened, here's the results of what we heard. But this additional, as we dive deeper into this is really more information that's largely going to be shared with you because it's a part of your work process. These are the numbers and data that you'll be using. And so this is largely for your edification. It's still valuable to make sure that it's in comprehensible English, but to distinguish, that is more the public facing. This conversation about the metrics is more the board facing.
Thank you.
Dr. Dixon,
Yes.
would a devotion of more resources from grades 5 through 8 allow us to move the 6th and 8th grade numbers up to 70%?
We don't believe it's the necessary resources. It is making sure that our teachers, well, let me take that back. We have the instructional materials. We just have to make sure that all of our teachers are trained and that we're monitoring the implementation of the curriculum that we are utilizing. So that's where, if we're talking about additional resources, maybe in training, because we have a lot of the things, the stuff, but what we don't have is the consistency of implementing. We don't have, remember in the PDK audit, it talked about, we don't even have program evaluations. So we have not really gone back to see how well we're implementing the different programs, that the various programs that we have. So to your point, I think it's what was stated earlier. Here is our instructional plan. This is the model. This is what we're going to utilize. And we are going to stick to this. And we're going to implement these programs with fidelity. We're going to come back and report out to the board and to the community how well we are doing, how well our students are doing in each of these grades as we progress to meeting our goals.
And then again, we will be hearing an update on the PDK audit at the next board meeting, correct?
Correct, absolutely. And then part of that, and that's one of the things that Dr. Pierce and I discussed. Remember, there were the audit stated there were there were policies that were missing. So, we couldn't get to our goals because we had no policies that said, for example, there are evaluations of courses. You evaluate your courses, you evaluate your materials, you evaluate your programs that were not there. You don't require lesson plans. You don't, all of those things needed to be board policies. And those are some of the things that Dr. Pierce, as on the academic committee, that she is going to be working with the academic teams to make sure that we have those policies in place.
Thank you, ma'am.
AJ, so many times we also ask, or a lot of reporting, we see where we are compared to where our kids should be. Is that necessary to indicate in any of these graphs?
Yeah, and so that's part of what the superintendent is trying to highlight here by showing you the difference between spring 2019, the last time you had spring data, and where she anticipates you'll be by spring 2026. And so, yes, you do need both of those. You
But
need
that's our data. That's our data. So I'm assuming there's an average of where a child should be. I see where we want to go, but many times they say, well, this is where we're at, this is where they should have been, and this is where we want to be. Does that make sense? So it would.
Oh, you mean the benchmarking data? That's
Yeah. Well, Dr. Dixon, sometimes, so it says third grade spring 2019 OST. It says 43. So should they have been at 50? Right? That is my question. I mean, this might not be necessary, but sometimes people will say, should.
yeah. Let me try to ask this in a different way. Do you know what score students would need to get on this on the OST in order to be on track to be considered college ready?
the individual, I'm sorry, is that a question you're asking me? Say that again, AJ. Go back to that, Misty, if you go back to, I'm sorry, go back to the other frame.
Does Ohio release what score is correlates with what the state believes is college ready?
No. Well,
does it release what score it believes is correlated with on grade level proficiency?
yes, it does.
And do you have an idea of what that is?
No, I don't. I didn't have it. No.
I didn't know if
But
there's
you know what?
any of the data folks online.
Yeah, no, we can bring that when we do the when the team comes and present. I can make a note to make sure that we provide that information.
Okay.
Okay, can I ask a quick question? Maybe I'm confused. Aren't these percentages of students scoring proficient?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I'm just saying that is it necessary to have that data of what they should be? That's all. I was just asking.
But isn't what they should be proficient? I mean, I think this is telling us.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get a sense of is what does the state of Ohio think that this data means? Do they think it means on grade level? Do they think it means college ready? Have they correlated it with a SAT or SAT in any way? That's the question I hear Ramona asking, like what is the level we really want our students to be at, and to what extent if they are present in the numerator on this particular metric, does that mean that they've accomplished that? So for example, in Texas, we have meets grade level and master's grade level. But when you actually unpack it, meets grade level only means students have a 60% chance of being successful at first year post-secondary. Whereas it's really the master's grade level that puts them at that 75% chance that is correlated to the ACT and SAT college readiness rates. And so a lot of people build their goal setting around meets grade level, thinking that it's the same thing as master's grade level, and it's not. So that's the question I hear everyone asking is, like, where do they actually need to be, and are we gearing off of that? And what I'm saying is I don't know the answer to that, because I don't know what level Ohio says that students have to score at, and I don't know if this is benchmarked to that or not.
Right.
But that's something that your superintendent said she go figure out and then bring back.
Right. And we're not, one of that question we're having, and I'll talk about a little bit on another slide when we get to the closing some of the gaps. There's a conversation happening now with changing Ohio's report cards. And that is a conversation that superintendents, we're concerned about, because now they want to change the report card while COVID is happening, and how that will affect districts when they're setting these metrics and they're trying to align it to to proficiency and mastery. So that conversation is happening now, and we've been weighing in from our perspective. Even do we get away from that report card grade, or we go to a system of stars, etc. So that conversation is happening because they're trying to align these, especially in our primary grades, more of this to our longer outcomes for graduation. Yeah.
Other questions about goal 1 around strengthening reading proficiency? It's probably your most straightforward of the 3, but again, I would argue is almost certainly going to wind up being the most challenging of the 3. And someone else have a question or comment?
So AJ, my only comment is that proficiency level, as I understand it, is that our students meet the basic expectations for the identified content areas. And so in that regard, I think these measures are ensuring that our students meet the basic level, but it's my sincere hope that this is just a baseline even for us, that the actual goal is to move our students beyond that 75% baseline of meeting those basic standards.
Yeah, one of the challenging things, and you all as a board are going to need to be prepared to communicate this when asked, is, well, wait a minute, why are we going from 33 to 65? Why aren't we going from 33 to 100? And the unfortunate reality is I'm not familiar with school systems that have made that type of leap in a 5-year period. I am familiar with school systems that have, in fact, doubled the percentage of their students who are proficient in a 5 or 6 year period. I have seen that. I had the privilege of being a board chair in a school system that accomplished that feat. So that I do know is doable. But I also know that there are about 100 ways for a board to screw it up and about 1 or 2 ways for a board to get it right. And so among the ways that you all as a governing team can make this impossible for your staff to accomplish is you'll just want to start calibrating your thinking to, if we do this as a board, will this add yet another expectation onto our teachers' plates who we've tasked with accomplishing this? Like there's only so many things that your staff will be able to handle and juggle, and this will monopolize much of that attention and capacity. And so, yeah, if you're going to adopt these, that means you are going to have to willfully change your behaviors as a board to stop elevating issues to being on par with this, recognizing that every time you elevate a new issue that isn't this on par with this, that you begin to deprive your staff of a focus on this. And so invariably, what will happen next week, something new will come up. You have way too many students and way too many staff for a week to go by without some new circumstance to emerge. And the question is, when that does, will you try to bring that issue to front and center to begin to take time of this board and this administration and your teachers, or will you find a way for that to be resolved without being brought and elevated to the same level of stature and focus and attention as these goals? That is hard because the people who elected you, when they have an issue, they will expect you to champion it as loudly as you possibly can and to dominate board meetings with whatever the latest concern is. And they have every right to have that expectation. You, however, will have to make a decision. Do I want this? In which case I have to minimize the things that we take on as a governing team. Or is this an issue that I believe is sufficiently important that I am comfortable chipping energy that you're going to have to wrestle with? That's the challenge that you're going to face. And that is about the number one thing you'll be able to do as a board, to actively undermine this on behalf of your students. Once these goals and guardrails are eventually adopted, whenever that occurs, almost all of my energy will be in supporting you at staying intensely focused on the things that you said are most important. But that will be your biggest challenge. That will be where you are most seduced to fail your children.
And AJ, on the other side, we also, when the administration or when we're looking at expenses, they should be aligned.
Absolutely.
with this, right?
Your goals should be the first priority for resource allocation.
Yeah.
And if your superintendent, if your CFO, they come together and say, here's what we recommend, be the budget for SY 21, 22, and they can't convince you that the first priority for resource allocation is accomplishment of this set of goals, then I would tell them to take this back and either do more homework or get more persuasive. But either way, it's not ready for prime time. Other questions or comments about goal one? All right, so this is the relatively easy one.
Yes, I do.
Oh,
I'm
Michael,
sorry.
Michael.
I in chat that I had a question.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Madam Superintendent and AJ for this. On the Cray piece, I see, and I believe that was the question that you initially asked, Dr. Pierce, was that around the 31 to 31 so this being the basic score that we can get in terms of predicated score, is that the basic score again? For demonstrating, Madam Superintendent?
Is the 31 the basic score? The 31 is ours, is the score that we have. This is how our students did.
Okay.
And we're trying to move so the goal is, and then we're trying to move our students to the goal, proficiency. The 31 is proficiency.
All right, so 31 is proficiency.
And hold on, I just want to clarify, make sure we're using the same terminology.
Okay.
So the OST has limited, basic, proficient, accelerated, advanced. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so of those 5, this is not limited or basic. This is proficient, which also means it's not accelerated or advanced. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Got it. Yeah, Michael.
And so that's why Dr. Pierce is saying, are we moving higher than just proficiency? Or are we just keeping our students we're trying to get our students proficient.
All right, so yeah, I appreciate that. I just want to be clear that we've got some, and I hear what you're saying, AJ, but I just want to be clear that we've got some kind of, we got a BHAG thing going on. We got, we're going
to get off the floor first.
Big, hairy, audacious goals here. And so this column 2021 represents exactly where we are right now this year, or what we're striving for this year.
Yeah, this is what we're striving for this year.
Okay.
And to your point, Michael, I could see it. I think you're right. The step one is you have to get off the floor. And right now you're kind of at this really low level of performance, and you want to, move up from there. I could see 5 years from now, you hit that 70% mark at proficient. This board may come back and say, okay, we don't want to talk about proficiency anymore. Now we want to base our goals off of accelerated or advanced.
Quite honestly, AJ, I think that we should be talking about, we want to get off the floor, of course now, but by 2023, we need to be re-looking at where we're headed towards the trajectory for 2025. To me, we need to be resetting those goals and looking at them more aggressively. That's just my thought. But by 2023, we need to be looking tough at that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, though.
Dr. Pierce?
And so I guess my question or my comment really connects to Board Member Coe's comment. I understand that we're using the MTSS as a starting point. Given that we have COVID-19, I would be open to the superintendent, based upon the data and the current trajectories that we have, if she needed to go back in and reassess and realign the 2021 goals, so they truly align with where our students will be. I want us to start at a true baseline. I think this MTSS was written before COVID-19 and everything hit. in connection to what Board Member Cole is saying, you know, I think by the time we get to 2025, he's right, we should be at that 75%. So at 2023, you know, we should, in some instances, I mean, if we look at our sixth grade, we're just moving from 40 to 50, you know, and I take that that's a good percentage jump. But then by 2025, we're just at the 65%. So we still miss that mark of 75% of our students performing proficient. And I get it, it's a big task, but I completely agree with Board Member Cole.
And what I can also bring back to you is how many students that these numbers represent. And I think that's good for you to see how many students in each grade. But we can do that. I like that idea, Dr. Pierce, that we go back and reset the goals, because you were right, it was made prior, these goals were done prior to COVID.
And then I think too, even as you think about resetting those goals, when you look at the fact that from, October 2nd, our enrollment has gone from 58,000 to January 15th. I mean, from 48,000 on October 2nd to 46,000 on January 15th. So we've lost the number of students, and that might also give additional perspective on how we approach the goals.
Great.
Other questions or comments? Strengthening English proficiency. Other questions or comments? Strengthening reading proficiency, I mean. James, if you're speaking, you're muted. Okay. Then let's go to one that's probably going to take a little more conversation. Let's go to goal 2. This is developing portrait-ready graduates. This is a really interesting one, and that essentially what you're saying to your superintendent is what Carol was describing earlier. How do we measure today the likelihood that our students are moving in the trajectory of adaptability, communication, creativity, critical thinking, global empathy, and technology? And so to try to develop a metric around that has actually required the administration to go and do some significant rethinking of a number of its practices, which is exactly what a board would want goals to do. You want goals to challenge adult behavior and cause disruption that drives behavior change on the part of the adults in your system. It's just normally a lot of the goals I see don't inspire as much change as this one could potentially inspire. So I want to invite the superintendent to take a little bit of time and walk through what she's identified as the metrics behind developing portrait-ready graduates.
Okay, thank you. So Misty, if you progress to the next one, slide, please. So this is the one that, again, I think really allows us to be creative. And we are actually we're going to partner with Columbus State Community College on this one to help us create this strategy that the whole team is excited about. So in order for this portrait to become alive, we think it has to start in the elementary school. So, at each grade band level, students would be able to demonstrate competencies in the portrait of a graduate at the end of elementary school, middle school, and culminating at the end of high school. So there would be, this would be part of their lessons. We would embed lessons in our curriculum so that students could demonstrate this. We want students, elementary students, to come home from school and be able to demonstrate to the family what is a critical thinker. And so we're really excited about that. Identify where these areas align with our current curriculum to provide aligned opportunities for deeper learning around the traits. And the end goal is to incorporate a portrait of a graduate in our daily routines from kindergarten to 12. We have student ownership of portrait traits. This would increase agency. How much do students see themselves? We'll create a continuum for grade level focus, For example, kindergarten students focus on communication skills of listening in the first semester. We would involve parents and caregivers of what is a Columbus City School graduate, and do this in kindergarten and throughout the academic year. And we believe too that, we had so many stakeholders that came together to help us build this portrait. And we stated that the ownership of what a CCS graduate should look like should not be ours alone, but it should be the community and have community voice. And you allowed that to happen through this portrait process. So we believe this will keep the portrait alive. And so when students come to Columbus City Schools, they know they're going to be portrait ready because it's going to be embedded in everything that they do. Another example is kindergarten read alouds that target empathy. Students identify how characters were empathetic. Expand opportunities to identify, develop, and show portrait traits. And then we also talked about that students can receive a portrait seal. So part of their student or graduate, they, depending on how many of these competencies they can demonstrate, they can receive a portrait seal. And then part of that too, these other two are we added as part of getting students portrait ready is a CTE goal. The percentage of CTE students graduating who are earning industry recognized credentials will increase from 72% to 85%. And then CCP, we talked about College Credit Plus, the percentage of eligible students, GPA and or ACT or SAT remediation score, free score, graduating who earn college credit will increase from 86% to 95%. So we decided, if you recall, when I first introduced this, I had these last two goals separate, but we believe that this is all part of the portrait of the graduate. So we pulled those last two pieces in under goal 2 so that we would have that separate goal.
Board members, what questions do you have about goal number 2? There's a lot to unpack here.
I don't think I have a question, just in terms of, well, I'll pose it as a question. As I look at our MTSS and our decision trees, our tier 1 and tier 2s, have you all thought critically about how our portrait of a graduate, does it become a branch on our decision tree? Does it come an additional tier? When we talk about our tier 1, 2, and 3, is there a tier 4 now, or is that integrated into our existing tiers and decision tree models?
That's a good question, Dr. Pierce. We believe now that it will be integrated. However, we are partnering with Columbus State to help us design this, but the intent will be to have this embedded. But we thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to partner with an organization to help us develop it, and then also help students see that becoming a portrait ready grad doesn't mean that all the experiences have to happen in the school building. And how can we design lessons that will bring students outside the school building? For example, if they go to Columbus State campus, even as an elementary student or a middle school student, but how can we design lessons that that will give them real experiences outside of the classroom? So I agree to your point that we need to make sure, be mindful of that and add that as part of the framework. So people, we're using that same visual, that same framework in everything that we do. So that's a good point.
Other questions or comments?
I have one.
Yeah, Carol and then Michael.
I really love the CTE goals and the CCP goals. And I like them because I think that forcing the organization to work toward those goals, especially the CTE goal, is really important.
Yep.
the connection to the portrait ready or the portrait competencies is just, I mean, portrait competencies are going to make them successful at anything. So to some extent, yes, I see how they tie in. What I guess, and I think it all sounds really, really wonderful, really wonderful. I think that the seals are a great idea. I can see that sort of getting us to migrate into mastery transcripts on the portrait side and the competency side, which would be really cool. And I love the partnering with Columbus State. How far along the process are we of what's it going to look like? And you know, I just, the sense of urgency is making me crazy.
So that's a good question. So one, you know, I wanted to push and not allow our organization to look at students. You know, I understand the student pathways are important, but if students know early on that you're going to be a graduate of Columbus City Schools, and these are the different programs and opportunities that you have, then our students will be prepared for whatever pathway they choose. Not necessarily we are pushing kids in certain pathways. So some kids, so for example, we've not seen as many students take advantage of CTE opportunities, right? Exactly. And it could be because students believe that path, you know, that's not a viable pathway because they may not get involved in what CTE is until the senior year and believe, oh my gosh, this is my only option. And we've seen that we don't have as many students taking opportunities for CCP courses. So we're saying that, wow, how can we embed as part of your graduation requirements that students have to take so many CCP courses before you graduate? And those students are getting an opportunity to have college credits and get that experience prior to graduating. So that's why we were trying to pull it all under one umbrella, that in order for our students to demonstrate all of these competencies that we talked about, adaptability, communication, but we're not compartmentalizing our students. We're looking at the whole student and saying that here's different pathways for you, while also strengthening the opportunities for them to have access to CCP and CTE courses earlier.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, because I when I was teaching high school, it was not being utilized as well as it should have been, and it made me crazy. So I'm happy that we're focusing like with laser-like precision on it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is about well, I will talk about it another time, but you know, it's about convincing students it's worthwhile, because I think they, you know, dismiss it and don't realize what they're dismissing. But anyway, yeah, no, I it's all good. I'm just
we're just eager. So we well, I would say this: we have our teams. I've met with the college, with the president of Columbus State. We have our teams have already started working together. They've, you know, so we have I think they're calling one part CCP 2.0. I think they've already have a name of this whole strategy and alignment. So the work has already started. And we are thinking of having a group of students for this summer, for a summer program, before we kick off some parts of it this fall. So the work, yes.
Did I misunderstand? Is the part about Columbus State just focused on CP, or are they rolling up the sleeves and helping us figure out how to integrate the competencies into the curriculum?
Oh yes, all of this whole page. Yes, all of it. Yep, it started with developing the portrait, but then while we were there, you know, Dr. Breeden, who would be when we present this other, you know, she's been looking at, you know, the CTE goals, our performance, and also we've been looking at the number of students who are not taking advantage of CCP. And so we're figuring out how can we get more students involved. So we thought it would be an opportunity to partner with them to get all of this stuff done with Columbus State, and then we're utilizing some other universities for another opportunity.
Right.
So additional questions from Michael, and then from Dr. Pierce, and then from Jennifer.
Thank you. Couple things, and I put a lot more definitive information into the chat.
Okay.
I really want to impress upon this administration to really take an opportunity to more in-depthly look at where there's opportunity in the workforce space. It's tremendous, particularly even now at this time. So this is an administration at current in the governor's office that is really pushing workforce, and particularly industry sector opportunities. I really think that you all should take a very serious look at that and figure out how do we even expand this CTE number, this career tech education number that you're aspirationally looking at even further. I think you have the opportunity to make some faster gains. You might, within the next year or two, be able to be at 85%. Okay. Quite honestly. I mean, that's how much this is out here. I think that there are other community organizations that I might even be able to help you leverage that opportunity above and beyond or alongside Columbus State Community College. So I think that that's a wonderful starting point. But there are also other community organizations that are offering these different types of opportunities that you can look at partnering with. So to that effect, in addition, I would love to see what the CCP numbers are. I'd love to get some idea about data on CCP participation. A lot of this has got to be an aggressive campaign against removing stigmas. There's a level of ignorance, and I'm not saying stupidity for my listening audience or my colleagues. Just you don't know. It's not knowing. So I'm using that word very denotatively. You just don't know. Well, it's now time for us to start ensuring that people know about our campuses, and quite honestly, that we start to invest more into the cultivating those our two campuses I know of, Fort Hays and Downtown High School, with the appropriate dollars to expand their programs. We got it. We have got incredible competitive advantage. And I'm saying that not just because of what I know here locally. We have the opportunity to compete with everybody else. I like to take country drives. I do. I just like to get on the road and ride. Well, there are times where I'll drive through some of these off counties. I can't remember. I had an eye appointment like in Lancaster, right? I drove out there and saw their vocational campus, their career campus. It was humongous. And they intentionally make significant investment in that. So, a neighboring district, Southwestern City Schools, is another one that's made significant investment in their career tech program and their campus. So I really think that we should be looking more aggressively in this career tech education space, because to me, 85% in 5 years or 4 years, I think we can do better than that. And again, I'd like to know what the numbers are on participating for CCP, College Credit Plus, for those, again, who are hearing us list these abbreviations. I have a kid, at least one, that really benefited from that. But again, I think that there's a way that we explain this to people to help them make sense of it, because they don't understand how much of a hustle CCP is. Not just AP courses, that's important, but this stuff right here is actual college credit. And the more that we pump that up and impress upon folks who are prepared to do this, I think that we'll see the gains even farther beyond what we set out for. So please have your administration think out of the box. I'm not trying to insult. I'm not trying to do that. I know that they're doing good work. They're working hard. But I
Yeah.
just think that there might be some opportunities that we can tease out a little better in these goals we set.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. I will also add that to your point about CTE, we have been working and received that JP Morgan Chase grant, about $3.1 million. And that was because, we wanted to look at workforce development and seeing how we can get our students placed. That's important. It's one thing to have our students in the classroom doing the work, but to your earlier point, how can we get our students out there with other with business leaders and people in the workforce to make sure that they have those opportunities? So we're excited. There's going to be an announcement. I'll make sure you all receive that information, an announcement about the JP Morgan Chase grant. I think it's 3.1 million. And then the CCP, I would definitely bring that information back if this is the board believes that this is a goal we like, but bring you that information so you know how many students that we're talking about for our, how many students and the opportunity. To your point, we have an opportunity to get more students, but that marketing, we have our communications person along with Columbus State Communities, their community communication specialists. They both are working together to create that strategy of how we can market all of this as part of our strategy working with Columbus State. So thank you.
I do. I'm sorry to keep talking. Was anybody else waiting?
Hold on. We had folks in the queue. We had Dr. Pierce next, then Jennifer, and then Carol, you'll be up after that.
Thank you so much. So I'm going back to the MTSS. I have a question about our CTE. So in our decision tree, it states that at tier 1, in essence, we're encouraging all of our students to take an assessment. It doesn't clarify what assessment. So is there any way that we can clarify that assessment? Is it the state level badge that they're going for? Is it their industry credential that they're going for? I think the more we can specify that for our experts and teachers and students, the better that will be. And so I guess I'm also interested in understanding that industry recognized credentials.
Yep.
Sometimes the standards by which an industry will pass a student might be more rigorous than the standards by which the state will pass a student.
Absolutely.
Are we going to hold true to those industry recognized standards, or are we going to hold true to the state recognized standards? So that's just a general question I have.
Okay.
Then when we come to the CPE, the CCP, sorry, I'm going to my high school course guide because my student finally got theirs. I got a couple of copies, but when we go to page 16, one thing that I really appreciated when you all first presented it was that we're adding in those honors courses, and we're adding those courses in earlier. Even at the 8th grade mark, we have the English 8-9 online compacted. So what I'm again in agreement with board member Cole, what I would like to see, in addition to not just the students that are in that College Credit Plus program already, but do we have any current students that are doing that English 8-9 online compacted, especially since we have Digital Academy, since we have virtual learning? How have we launched and ramped up those honor courses, leveraging the technology that we have right now? So I would like to see the figures on that. And then as we develop the plan, I'd be interested just to monitor and track how we're taking those students from, again, those honors courses to preparing them for that ACT, SAT.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And did you want to respond to the inquiry she had around state standards versus industry standards?
Yes, we do. We're looking at both. And I have those numbers, and I just didn't put them as part of the presentation to let you know how well our students are doing. And what we found too, that, you know, you can still graduate and not get those and not meet those standards, right? And so what we're trying to do is make sure that our students are graduating, but they're graduating ready to go to work. And, you know, yes, they're getting a diploma. Yes, they meet that criteria, but we want them to leave with that industry credential done, and they can go directly to work. And that's important, but I'll have those numbers. And then we also found, you will see that our students are in some of those CTE courses are outperforming some of their peers that are taking those courses from other districts. So when we looked at that data, we were really excited to see that our students were exceeding and are on par with their peers from other school districts.
Jennifer, you're up.
In thinking about the beginning of this, where you're talking about, you know, the grade banding and what's going on, when do you, or in what time period of the strategic vision are we awarding our first seals in your thought process? Is it 5 years, 10 years? Like, when do you, what class, who's getting the first seals?
So we're still working on that part. It depends on how we, you know, just how we come together with it with Columbus State and the two teams. We're first kind of building the courses, you know, if we're saying that it's the kindergarten course, you know, class, and we build that way, or if it's going to be the sixth graders. So we were kind of looking, there's a kindergarten or sixth graders, and we don't want it to necessarily be the ninth graders. We were thinking, you know, the kindergarten or the sixth grader.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. This is a heavy lift to build these. Yes. And so, and then that's why I appreciate you putting in some of these other goals, because, you know, all right. Students are important right. In this goal, right? Even though we might not yet be ready to actually award seals because we don't have the program built. We can still use the attributes around these other types of goals. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and in truth, the seals and the attributes of those actually cross into all the other goals too. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that I was, you know, I knew kind of where administration's kind of vision was about which or where we would actually start seeing seals on diplomas. And then, you know, that kind of delineation between why the CTE, CCP is there, and not like in that building kind of part. That first right. part is all about building.
Yeah. And then the other piece too, thank you for that, is making sure, you know, as we get just like the JP Morgan grant, I mean, the Chase grant, we want to make sure too that there's some alignment when we are participating and receiving monies or participating in partnerships, that it is aligned with something, right? So that grant is workforce development, getting students hopefully excited about CTE. Then we want to make sure that that's another layer of support that will provide experiences for our students, and we want to show that as part of getting our students ready for graduation.
Is there not that I want to add more goals, because just to remind board members, what happens with all these goals is that they start to, you know, get into the evaluation and all of that. So we want to be strategic in how many goals that we're actually giving. But now understanding that it may be a sixth grade start or even younger start for the seal, is there, because those are two high school graduation kind of targeted goals, is there a mid goal somewhere in middle school that we think could help us kind of lift that? And I'm asking, I don't know, it's just an idea to come back. So we have, you know, those industry credentials, those to me feel more like high school, ninth grade on. Is there maybe an intermediate goal? And maybe it's something within those. It's exploration, kind of like Dr. Pierce was saying, or, you know, I don't know, other types of courses. Maybe it's just an embedded goal, but if we really are going to, if we decide that portraits don't start until this kindergarten class right now, that's a lot of kind of classes in between. And so it might be nice to have some intermediate kind of middle school type of goals to look at too.
Okay. Okay.
And I have no idea what they would be. You know, academic committee might help on that, but if in fact it is the kindergarten class, not the 6th grade class.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Carol?
Yeah, actually, Jen stole most of where I was going, which was about
Well done, Jen. Well done.
Shut her up. Shut her up. But I think it would be great to see, you know, the end goal is the seal, the empathy, the global empathy seal, or the critical thinking seal, or something, you know, one of the portrait seals. But it would be in the 5-year window. I would hope that part of the work that Columbus State and our team are come up with is sort of a 3rd grade checklist that you're on the way to ultimately getting the seal.
Okay.
And that goes into your portfolio or something. And then we can measure progress on that.
Right. Just a good, the team was talking about some sort of interdisciplinary project for middle school students. So maybe it's something we need to make sure that's developed, but there was talk about doing that, to your point. Okay.
Who else? What questions, comments do you have on goal 2, developing portrait-ready graduates? All right, and then that takes us to examining goal number 3. With goal number 3, we move on to closing opportunity gaps.
So goal number 3, we talked about the state report card. Now we know I put a note here that we have the new state report card metrics are pending. But when we look at the number of schools that receive A, B, C, D, and F, the numbers are alarming. We didn't have any schools that receive A's. We have 3 schools that receive B's. You see here 34 C's, 40 schools receive D's, and 33 received F's. So part of that, and it goes back to our strategic priority, and that is strong schools in every, we put strong learning communities in every region. And we believe that we have an opportunity of making sure that those are strong learning communities in every region by closing that gap of how well those schools are performing. And so this one, and we don't have these other numbers here yet, what that number is going to be, because we're waiting to see what those new report card metrics grades may be. But we want to be able to move these schools up grade levels. We definitely said we have 3 schools that have a B. We want to move those up to A's, and then determine what schools in these other categories that we would move up by how close they were from that next to that next grade level. And then the next page, if you move there, Misty, I just highlighted for you what schools received those overall grades and met those indicators. And so to go to the next ones, I just organized them in a way that you can see, and go to the next. And again, these opponent and these indicators, all of that is pending, changing right now. And so we don't know what that's going to look like now that the report card is kind of still in limbo right now. And so, but as we get more information, that's going to be important for us to move those schools' overall grades up. And then go to the next one. You can just go through, Misty, the next couple slides. And again, I just organize those. Now, if this is one of the things the board agrees on that we want to look at, these schools, we're going to organize them by regions. And so you get a regional scan of all the schools and how well the schools are doing in each region. And then again, that's going to, that's going to be measured by how well students do on those state tests, which are still in limbo as well. As the state is looking at other measures, we're pushing the state to look at other measures of deciding on, how schools are graded. But we looked at that as one of the measures, one of the ways to close the opportunity gaps. Now, also we looked at looking at student groups, and closing those gaps too with student groups, but we wanted to start here, and moving the entire buildings and their grades.
Eric, and then I saw Carol's hand.
Yeah, if I'm understanding this, I'm not, excuse me, do we need to give each school its own goal, based on what's realistic? Are we telling everybody you just have to move up one grade? Or are we really looking at each school and saying, this is your goal?
Right.
And
Right. We're looking at each school. Each school has a goal. We're making sure we're supporting the schools to meet those goals and close those gaps, by giving them the support that they need. And that's what's one of the things a lot of the principals have stated, that it's harder for them to get to that next level because they believe they don't have some of the additional supports. And what schools have done traditionally, just not in Columbus, they use their Title I dollars, and they're using their Title I dollars to build a plan, build a strategy, and all with good intent, but sometimes that is told something different from the curriculum that the school district may be implementing, and they may not have all the supports that they need to really to drive those goals to where they should be. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about strong learning communities in every region, we kind of decide what's going to define what those strong schools are. And that's part of the work that you guys will see later out of the strategic plan. But we wanted to make sure for the board, when we talk about closing some of those opportunities gaps, a lot of those opportunities rather, are embedded on how well these schools are doing on certain measures.
thank you.
And if we need to outline
I
those,
saw.
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Talisa, what were you saying?
I was going to say, if we need to outline what those measures are better for the board, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, when you're sending the refresh of some of this, I would include that with it.
Yeah.
Next, I saw Carol, then Dr. Pierce, then Ramona.
I was thinking a little bit about how the same way we have to be mindful about not asking you to do too many things at once. We have to be mindful about not asking the schools, each individual school, to do too many things at once. And I'm not suggesting we don't do this, but it might be nice to, alongside these measures, keep track of progress on portrait of a graduate competencies, schools that are implementing those things faster or with more fidelity and that sort of thing. And also the reading, although that would be more for elementary school kids, but, you know, so that we can show, or if you're high school, on your CTE and CCP participation. So we can, you know, balance out, okay, maybe they didn't get their overall grade on the state report card up, but look at, you know, they are focusing on our other goals. And I don't know, I'm just thinking, let's be mindful of that and find some way to give them credit if they make more progress on another one of our parameters.
Right. Because, yeah, you're right. Because part of this is making sure, you know, the graduation, when we look at our high schools, you know, making sure that that's an indicator, how many that you know, that if you have a group of 900 ninth graders, you should have 900 seniors graduating. And so that's part of it too.
Dr. Pierce, and then Ramona, and then Michael.
So I want to take us to how the state currently defines kind of this gap closing measure, right? It's really getting at the performance expectations for our most vulnerable student populations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of the questions they say are, how are the different groups of students performing? One, I think we need to continue to refine and ensure that we're collecting the right data from our student groups. So these broad categories that we have for race and ethnicity, we really need to start to get at the culture around them, right? So there's a difference between, you know, the experience that our Black American students may be having from our African American students, so our students that have immigrated from Africa, right? And so we really need to understand that and be really in tune with the cultural differences, you know, as I think about, for example, our Somali students, the cultural differences that exist between the two different cultures that reside here in our community. And, you know, the other thing about that too is, do we have a firm understanding of the matriculation pattern for those students from, for example, an elementary school building, then to a middle school building, then to a high school building? Because we have open enrollment, you might do some really great things at the elementary school level, but once those students start picking what middle school they're going to, your numbers may drastically drop in middle school, with the hopes that when they get to high school, by some chance, they all decide to come back together and they're still on track, right? So I think it's important for us to understand how they're selecting that pattern, that feeder pattern. Because again, in our district, you can go off your neighborhood feeder pattern and you can choose your pattern based upon program or area. The other thing that concerns me about this particular goal is that it focuses on our most vulnerable students, but it doesn't get to our exceptional students, our gifted and talented students, right? And so oftentimes when we talk about closing the gap, we ignore those students and assume because they're gifted and talented, you know, we don't need to still challenge them or provide, certain interventions that push them along even further, because we're focused on closing the gap for our most vulnerable students.
That's good. If you go to that next slide again for me, Misty, to your point, Dr. Pierce, if you would see here in this last column, and it talks about if the gifted indicator was met or not met, to your point. And so that is important, and it goes back to the work that Dr. Kirsten Smith is working on to make sure that we have supports for students who have that label. And so, and providing programs and supports for all of those students, and the district deciding to participate in assessing students on that metric. Because if you have a set number of students, you have the programs, and you, for whatever reason, do not decide to assess your students, you lose points on the state report card. And And what we learned that we were not just getting, it was just some low hanging fruit. We were not aggressively going afterwards. But to your point, we have to show that when our students, we get a tiered model, and tier 1, that means every student has access to the general education in tier 1, every student. And then tier 2, you provide different interventions for wherever, the students that need more. Tier 3, that's usually your students are in special ed. And then some districts put gifted students in tier 4, but you're providing those additional supports for students. And AP and honors is not gifted support. Those are courses that others can take, but those not gifted support. So to your point, we can't just focus on students who we deem put in, we have to make sure everybody have access to the curriculum and have an opportunity to master the basic curriculum. And those kids that need more, that's what equity, giving each kid what he or she needs, you provide those opportunities for those students and that support. And we were not doing a good job in the past of providing that.
And I agree with you in terms of that this is an important indicator to look at. And even the way that the state looks at it currently, I think we need to disrupt that system, because the state currently looks at it is, are you providing programs for gifted students? Well, you can be providing power of the pen, you can be providing moot court, but let's look at where those programs are. That equity issue is important. That cultural competency issue is important as well, right? How many GT specialists do we have going in our buildings that reflect the rich diversity of our students, right? Are we defining GT programs only as a chess or, an additional opportunity to write a paper, right? There's a variety of different ways that we can get at the giftedness of students and provide them enrichment programs. And so I would hope that we disrupt that and we challenge that notion of it simply being a count of programs, that while we expand our programs and we make sure that there's equitability around our district, that we also force the state to really start looking at the enrichment of those programs and whether those programs are really engaging our students. Because let the truth be told, when gifted students aren't engaged, they check out. Their grades can suffer just like any student's grades can suffer because they're disengaged. And the other element with that gifted piece too is, it's unclear of, because there is that research that shows you have to keep gifted students engaged. So you might see some fluctuations in their grades. What do we mean? What does the state mean when it says gifted students performing, right? The language in the state definition is gifted students performing, right? At level, like, how are we defining that level? And I would like us to assert how we determine that level to be for our gifted students, and that, of course, it'd be higher than the state basic minimum.
Right. Thank you. And two things. One, I believe the Portrait of the Graduate will allow that, those traits and those experiences that we're getting students as early as kindergarten. And second, Dr. Pierce, to your point, remember the PDK audit showed us and stated that we were not offering curriculum and opportunities for our students that were labeled gifted. They stated it. So, a lot of these things that we're working on were highlighted in the PDK audit. So thank you.
So in the queue, we've got Ramona and then Michael and Carol. Before we dive into them, we've got about 20 minutes left on what was planned for this evening. And I suspect we'll complete our conversation around goals in that time, but we certainly won't complete a conversation around guardrails in that time. Misty, can we remove the slideshow for just a second? I'll have you put it back up in a moment. But just so I can see folks' faces. So we've still got a few folks in the queue, and we'll come to you. To whatever time you all need to sort this out, we'll take the time to talk through it, assuming that we're actually going somewhere. And so I wanted to see you all's face and just get a sense. Obviously, we're going to keep talking about this because we got a few more people in the queue. But so far, based on what you're hearing regarding the portrait of a graduate in terms of your long-term vision, and then the goals as your near-term vision, are you hearing something that for you sufficiently pairs the reality of our students with the vision of our community, such that this is something you'd want to move forward with? Or are we completely off track and we are not in a position to move forward with the long-term vision and the near-term goals? I just want to get some feedback on that, and then we'll dive back in.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, Ramona?
Let Jennifer in. Her computer crashed and she has to use another. There she is. Sorry about that.
We don't have a board chair. We can do all kinds of stuff now. This is great. So what are some of your reflections on this? Does this feel like this is moving in the direction that you all intended, and we're moving towards something that matches what you all want to hold on to as the vision that you were going to drive over the next few years, or are we entirely off base? Just super quick, not speeches, but just we're on track. No, we're off track.
Trust the process. Trust the process. This is what we said we were going to do. I see us coming together with that today and moving forward with the input that the board members are giving. So trust the process.
Eric?
Yeah, I think that yes, we're moving forward. I like where we're headed. I like how this is shaping up. But it feels to me like we're not moving quick enough. I want to get there. While we're doing all this talking about this plan and developing the plan, what are we doing now with students? We're actually,
until you all adopt a set of goals, there is no moving forward with the plan. Like, that is the next step. Everything waits on this part, because everything has to be aligned to this part. So the answer is you. If you want to go quicker, then that means either we need to move with haste on adoption of some of this as a product if it already fits your intentions as a board. If it does not fit your intentions, we need to surface that quickly so that we can pivot and move to something that does. And so that's what I'm trying to test for. Like, are we moving in the right direction with this, that we're going to be ready to move on this, or we need to pivot significantly because this ain't it at all? Any other thoughts? Michael, what do you think?
I'll start with trust the process. I kind of agree with that tenet. I think that we are on track. What I'd like to see more of is clearer explanation on how we're going to close the belief gap with culture and climate in the district, as much as we are focused on reaching our goals. I believe that if we don't achieve that in tandem with what we're trying to accomplish, what we're ultimately trying to accomplish will not happen. We will continue to front row.
So some of that we're going to get to when we get into the guardrails. There's a lot of data that is going to be shown to you specific to culture and climate among faculty and students, but that lives more in the guardrails, the how the school system operates, not in the goals toward what the school system operates. So we'll come to some of that. So definitely be listening for that. Anyone else? Are we on the right track, or do we need to completely pivot? Carol?
I do trust the process, and I'm not sure we're not on the right track. It's going to take a while, I guess, and that's not good. But because we want to get there quick, it's urgent. I feel the sense of urgency.
What's missing for you?
This is what I was going to say. I was just about to say before you said this is that the reading is consistent. The reading goal is consistent with what we heard from our community sessions. Everyone said reading needs to be a priority. I mean, they kind of said reading and math needs to be a priority, but certainly they said reading needs to be a priority, and that came up consistently. So I think that's great. The second goal, which we're calling the portrait goal, and then we put in the CTE and the CCP. I think the CTE and the CCP are very good goals. I love them, but I don't know that they're really in furtherance of the portrait. And then when we go further, if I understood it correctly, this whole gap closing on the report card was also part of this middle goal, right? We hadn't gotten to the third goal yet, right? We're still in goal 2.
We've just started talking about the gap closure. The superintendent has introduced the concept, and
did I miss that that's goal 3, or is that still goal 2?
That's goal 3.
Okay. Then my thought is this, to answer your question, are we on track or not on track? In my mind, and I thought we had talked about this when we talked about this whole process, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was not as clear. This feels a lot like the old way of setting goals, relying on state tests and how we do on state tests. And one of the things that I thought came through loud and clear in most of the community conversations was that test and teaching to the test and all of that means is something to be avoided, and we need to find out other ways to measure our children and educate them and celebrate their successes. And so I guess my thought about this third goal is that I'm concerned that it's kind of business as usual. And what I was hopeful for these strategic goals is that we were going to bust out of business as usual a little bit and find more creative ways to measure and drive the organization to do things differently. And this feels a lot like we're doing it the same. So I don't know that that's what the process is. We're supposed to be having this discussion. So to answer your question, should we or shouldn't we have this discussion? I kind of think we should. So I don't know that the process is off. It's just taken a long time.
Other reflections? Are we on track or are we off track? Ramona and then Jen.
I believe we're on track, and I understand where Carol's coming from. I think the innovation and the change and the difference happens at the bottom, at the next level. You have to have the goal. The goals technically, right, don't change. Well, in my opinion, at the end of the day, you're in the goal. Your goal in every district and every school is to educate your kids. To make sure that they meet the standards that are set by the state, regardless of the fact that we did not set those and we don't set those. They still need to pass that in order to graduate. So we have to mention it, have to look at some place. So as you're setting that goal, meeting those things that are, and I guess lack of a better word would be superficial or set standards, then you're looking at the closing the gaps. I think that's where you're going to be looking at creativity. I mean, that's where I was going to go with as we went along, is asking about those, I guess, second tier. How do you get there? That's really administration work anyways, but just having some questions. I don't think it's going slow. I know that people say that it's going slow. We've been here for a very long time. We've had several meetings. I feel like we've had a lot of meetings. I mean, slow would mean that we had a meeting and the next meeting wouldn't be for 4 months and we wouldn't see AJ. So I don't want the illusion out there to say that we're moving slow. It seems slow because it's a big ship. It's important work. It's a lot of moving pieces. It's not a small company. You want to see it that way. It's not a small company. And it's not like work is not happening. As any of us professionals who run an organization, we know that even though technically your goal's not set there, you might not have your full resources, you're still kind of driving the organization to very similar goals and priorities because those are standards. So for your answer, AJ, I feel we are. I would love to see us maybe get a draft approval. I don't know what that means because I think some of the conversation that we've been having are maybe some of the additional spokes to the wheel. We have the wheel, now we're just, at least from the questions I've had and what we've heard, there's a couple of things that we can tweak along the way so that we can allow the administration to start putting some meat to this.
Jennifer and then Dr. Pierce.
Actually, Vice President Reyes took a lot of what I was going to say. You know, in doing strategic planning, I think we're actually moving at a quick pace, to be honest with you. And the way that we are setting this up in our, you know, kind of short, medium, and long-term kind of planning, we will continue to revisit this. And so it's about building this really strong foundation and not just, you know, putting it on paper and then putting the paper up on a shelf. It's really about changing the culture that we all start to utilize and really believe in what we're doing. And that goes to, I think, Michael, I think it was you said about culture and climate and this change about the way that we kind of approach it. And that takes time to get buy-in. And that's what this whole process was. We started with that community conversation, and we're having this very open public dialogue about where it is we're trying to get our district to. And I know you guys are tired of me saying this, but you know, we're 175 years old. We didn't get here overnight. Even this plan isn't, you know, going to fix everything, but you know, we're in a good start. I feel good about the big buckets we've created as goals as the thing. And I would tell the superintendent, what is the thing you want the board to ask you about every day? Like, that's what I want to know. And then how does that help us get to the portrait? And so that was my anthem to her in, you know, these conversations, because we have to be laser focused on these goals that we're telling her, giving her the flexibility to do her job as our chief executive to outline. And that's, we kind of got a little bit down, I think, into some of her stuff, you know, but I feel good. I feel good where we are. I feel proud of where we are, honestly. I'm proud of our work so far.
Dr. Pierce.
So I think we're on track. I will say that when it comes to what our community wanted related to graduation, they indicated that they wanted students that were prepared for college, career, and military. Us focusing on those CTE credentials and CCP aligns with graduation. If we start to see gains in those areas, we will start to see gains in our graduation rate. When we talk about the movement and are we moving fast enough, we will move as quick as our most vulnerable student population. And that's fine with me. And we as a community need to recognize that our students, our babies, need time to scaffold their learning. They need time to learn the culture of going to school. Our educators need to learn about our students' culture, and they need to show cultural competence. They need to be able to connect new learning and scaffold new learning to the cultures of our students. So when it comes to the timing and how long this is going to take, it's going to take as long as it needs to take for our most vulnerable students to show above proficient and accelerated knowledge and growth in all of their subject areas. And we as a community, if we mean what we say around equity, that's what it's going to take. Our community understanding that we can't rush this process.
James. James, you with us? Are we on track? We off track? How we doing? I just saw your face a moment ago. I know you out there. Talk to me.
Yes, I agree. We are on track. I do agree with the urgency, so let's get going.
And I would like to add to the team, just remember that we have a working group that's working on the priorities. So there's one more layer when you go back to that one pager. Remember that, you know, we have our portrait, and then we have the goals, the board goals, but then we have those strategic priorities, the immediate steps that we're working on. And I can't wait till you see what the team that they're doing on that. And that priority one is the whole child. Priority 2 is equitable opportunities for all students. And priority 3, supportive learning communities in every region. So that's where the team is building that plan. That's the how we're going to get to those near-term visions and ultimately go to the portrait. So those meetings that you guys, I don't know if you guys have been attending those, but we have a pretty robust team of teachers. Our union partners are there. Our union leaders are there. Administrators are there. And we meet every Wednesday. They have a working team. We have a meeting. I meet with Patel every Monday, and Patel is meeting with the writing team every Wednesday from 4:30 to 7.
And just remember, board members, the way we restructured our committees also align with us accomplishing these draft right now goals and guardrails, and it can be adjusted. But so the work is embedded in our work as well. So we are doing a lot, you know, and the way that we're approaching this structurally is really to embed this all of these concepts into our culture and our organizational practice.
So the question that I have for you all, kind of process-wise, is we're near at time for this evening. And so there are a few options. One, you can go into extra innings this evening. 2, you can stop and then plan to have another meeting that completes the conversation here and then moves into the conversation about guardrails. But I think those are your 2 main options. Is there a particular preference? You want to continue pushing in the conversation this evening, or do you want to pause the conversation here and then pick up in a second session that will finish out the conversation around the goals and then move into the guardrails? What preference do you have?
I'm about stopping and having our, only because I know us will be here another 2 hours. So you're going to ask us in 30 minutes and another hour where we should be. And we will be here at 10. Now, if everyone's good with being here at 10, 11 o'clock, I'm good. But, and also I think, you know, it deserves the time that it deserves. So I know I'm being kind of silly.
So
but
I'm seeing a lot of nods. I'll take that means that you are kind of representing the consensus of the board. Then before we call it quits, I want to go back to the very first page, because I do want to try to take one small step forward. And so Misty, if you could put up the page that shows the whole thing, the strategic plan framework. I think that's page 2 of this thing, yeah. So if we can come back here, then one question I'll ask is, are these the right buckets of work? So when we look at the long-term vision and we look at the near-term vision, just those 2, pay no attention to the strategic priorities at the bottom. As we look at our long-term vision and our near-term vision, my question is, are these the right buckets of work? And it's just a matter of creating the definition for the metrics under them, or are we still in question around whether or not these are the right buckets of work? Who will be the first to lean into this? Are the portrait of a graduate and the goals and guardrails, are these the right buckets of work to represent the long-term and near-term vision? And the next steps are that we just have to get clear about the metrics, or do we still need to get clear about whether or not these are the right buckets of work? Who will be the first to weigh in?
I think that they are the right buckets of work, although this is not the correct, most updated form. So board members know that wording has changed on this one. Yeah. But I think that the portrait is right based on our community. And then I think that these are the right goals. And, us talking through those, and I know we haven't got to the guardrails, but I also think the guardrails are on target too.
Anyone else? Are these the right, is the nature of our conversation as we move through the process, are we still determining whether these are the right buckets of work, or are these the right buckets and we just need to dig into the details of the metrics that will be presented to the board about them? Who else?
I'd say they look good to me. They feel good. I think that if any one of us were to refocus on all of this individually, there'd be tweaks and ideas and
Yeah.
things. But as a board, a consensus, I think this is good.
Who else? Yeah, Carol.
Right buckets just want a little more time to think about the metrics.
Got it.
I think they're
else?
the right buckets. They're the right buckets for me.
Okay. Dr. Pierce, Michael?
I think they're the right buckets, and I feel like I've shared most of my comments, questions, and concerns about those metrics. So,
Gotcha.
I agree with my colleagues. I still like to see something around the lines of creativity. Well, yep, we're right, buckets. We're good. We're good. I see this right here. We're good.
So what I hear, is there anyone we haven't heard from? I thought everybody spoke up. I heard James jump in. I think that was everyone. So it sounds like the perspective from the board, Talisa, I'm speaking to you directly right now. It sounds like what I'm hearing is the unanimous, direction forward is that this one pager right here, in terms of the long-term vision, near-term vision, that this is the right set of buckets that you need to begin slowly bending your team toward operationalizing. But that before we can write it in pen, that the board is going to need a little bit more, need to spend a little bit more time thinking with you through the metrics for the goals. And then I suspect there'll be similar amount of conversation regarding the metrics for the guardrails. But that if you found out that the superintendent shared the report to the graduate and the goals and guardrails as they exist on this document, if she sent that out to her staff and said, these are the buckets that we're going to have to operate on, we just got to iterate through the metrics, then nobody on the board would be surprised or appalled by that that is a fair representation of where we are in the process. And so, Talisa, that I would take that and run with it while you have unanimous consent on that point. But obviously that means we've got some more homework to do, both to refine on the goals, the metrics regarding the goals, and we're going to have to come back for a second round of this conversation. And so I apologize, Misty, that you got to work with us on putting calendar together again to identify another chunk of time to finish digging into the metrics around the goals and then to go through all the guardrails. So we're at time, but I did promise the folks who are already in the queue, that was Ramona, and then Michael and Carol, that if you all wanted to still speak out on this evening, that I make time for that. But if you're comfortable deferring that till when we come back, then that's your call. Ramona?
I can defer, or I can send my information to.
You'll send some thoughts to your superintendent?
Yeah, so that it's going to
be. Okay. Michael?
I'll send my thoughts to the superintendent, but I
okay.
should decide to convene again. I'm amenable, just not on a Friday.
Yeah, we'll definitely be convening. We'll definitely be convening again. But I hear that you have an aversion to Friday nights. I, on the other hand, don't. I'm just busy making my state capital tour. Earlier this week, I was with Boston. Tonight, I'm with Columbus. Tomorrow, I'm with Austin. And then next week, I'm with Des Moines. So, any day of the week, give me a state capital and I'm in it. But not Columbus on a Friday night. Check.
Or tour with AJ, my man.
Carol, you were also in the queue. Did you want to defer
I'm
checking
fine.
with your superintendent offline?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then that being the case, I do want to join your chair in celebrating So we have taken one tangible step forward, is that this board has reached unanimous agreement that this document does represent the right buckets of work in terms of the board's capturing of the community's vision, both long-term and near-term. And so the next time we get together, we'll spend a little bit more time on the updates that Talisa brings us back regarding the goals, and then we'll dive into the metrics regarding the guardrails. And then hopefully at the end of that, we'll see if we are far enough along that at your subsequent meeting, you can cast some type of preliminary or final vote to put these in place. Know that once these are in place, the easy work has officially come to a conclusion. And the hard work of implementation is really what we step into at that point. But with that, Dr. Dixon, just thank you and your staff for all the behind the scenes grinding. And I know I've nudged on you all a lot, and you and your team just consistently deal with me with a tremendous degree of patience. And for that, I am grateful. Madam Chair, back to you.
Thank you, AJ. We are grateful for you. Superintendent, thank you so much for leading us through this. And thank you to your team who did a lot of hard work on this. Thank you, board members, for not only having a regular board meeting this week, but also spending Friday night together. We've had a lot of special meetings, but it's worth it because we know that we're trying to push this district forward. And so we're grateful for you to do that. So if there's nothing else, we're waiting for the treasurer to pop back on, and we will take a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Beckerly,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
That's yes. I
thank
guess
you.
I gotta
Dr.
talk
Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes,
Yes.
and President Adair.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you so much. Good night.